I get it. Yeah, guys, today we're going to be sitting down with a very, very astound critic, political analyst, politician, soon to be, right? You are a politician, right?
It's an awkward term, man. But yeah, I guess.
And then you hand out flyers, you do door to door, everything, you know?
Yeah.
The hard work that most of our youth.
The grand forces.
Yes, the ground forces, man. And yeah, man, I've always wanted to have a conversation like this with you, obviously, because I've seen how outspoken you have been. And I've read your blogs, obviously, very radical. And I think that, you know, we need to have conversations like this, you know, where we conversate and pick the brains of people that we necessarily don't agree with.
Yeah.
Because the issue is that if we kind of build unity on issues that we agree with, we can always go forward with those issues far faster if we bickering about smaller issues on, you know, on the political landscape. And I've also seen that, you know, you've been involved so young, and you've been part of very big movements that have actually like changed the face of South Africa, you know, for students, for you know, decolonizing education, and you know, being against, you know, I don't want to drop all the buzzwords, but kind of like against white supremacy, you know, the legacy of apartheid, colonialism, you know, and the history of slavery. And I just have been super excited to be able to have this conversation. And this also is going to be my first podcast ever.
Oh shit! I'm the first invite.
Yes.
Man, that's
yes,
cool.
man.
I'm honored.
Yeah, and you've been one of the first that I've actually wanted to talk to, because I've been very interested in, like, you know, Pan-Africanism, and I dislike sometimes that a lot of people in, I would say, like center to right wing politics have no idea what they're criticizing. No idea. You know, they haven't even read a page of Fanon. They haven't even read a page of Steve Biko.
Yeah.
They don't know what they are actually up against. They just purely politicking, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, now we're going on to actually a subject, but you know, there's this thing in America called critical race theory.
Yeah, it's causing a big trouble.
Yes.
There.
And my problem with the response by Republicans in the US is when you ask them what it is, they don't know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, to them, it's just a hatred of white people.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
They don't understand that there's been so much written about it. It's a deep issue. It's not just like, oh, we hate white civilization and white people and everything. No, it's like looking at things from a psychological, philosophical, you know, and actually interpreting the reasons why there's systemic racism and all this thing. And you start to hate the buzzwords, but you don't grapple with the actual issues.
The content of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that we need more conversations about, you know, politics, especially in South Africa, where the media space isn't as open as I would like it to be, you know? But yeah, man, enough about me, man. Let's get on to your story, man. So I wanted to ask you about kind of your upbringing, where you were born, kind of what your first steps were, and if you like, you can link it to your political awakening and maybe things that you didn't actually awaken to, but only later now that you see are like weren't normal.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm a Cape Town born and bred. I was born in Mulberry maternity, actually. Yeah. Spent a few years of my younger life in Nyanga East. My mom was one of the first beneficiaries of the RDP houses. We moved to Lower Crossroads. Very, very, very tough place to live in. I remember growing up you would, on a weekly basis, man, like there's some criminal who's being beaten up by a mob, who's being killed by a mob. So yeah, that's me. I grew up with a single mother, wonderful mom. I mean, we're never rich or anything. My mom was a cleaner at first, was also at some point a security guard, moved on to work for an NGO. But at least, every day there was food on the table. I can never lie and say there was no food. Yeah, so I grew up in Lower Crossroads. That's why I call home. And I mean, of course, if you're in one space, everything that is in that space is the norm. I think life started changing for me in 2011 specifically. So in my high school, I moved from, I did my primary school in Kwafaku, which is around Lower Crossroad. So everything there was still the same, going to school with people who stay in the same area. We know each other. Basically, we're all the same. When I moved to Oaklands, my grade 8 and grade 9, that's when things started to shift. I mean, you take a bus, and the spatial planning of Cape Town, of course, it will always, if you leave your area, it's not obvious until you leave the actual area that you're in. So taking a bus to school every morning, you're passing all of these areas. I know the old Lansdowne Road, now it's the Jafta Masimula Road. After you pass Gugulet, you get into Marienburg, and then you pass Sharpskraal, you go past Hanover Park, you go past Lansdowne, Ronnebosch East.
Yes.
So you start to see,
The differences.
as you come closer to Claremont, there's a difference there, right?
Yes.
And the houses are different. You start wondering what's happening. But I think my real awakening, I mean, at that time, it was like, okay, cool, there's difference, but I don't really get it why. And also, I don't know, this is normal. Yeah. Okay, cool, we're different now, but okay, cool, this is the new norm for me. But things specifically changed for me in 2011. I don't know if people know this. Al Jazeera used to play for free. At a particular time, I remember if you change the channel to
Cape Town TV.
Cape Town TV,
Yes.
it used to play on Cape Town TV around 1 o'clock.
My granny loved it.
Yeah. So, and I used to love Al Jazeera, man. And boom, man, breaking news. People are on the streets across Tunisia, Egypt, Tahrir Square is the place to be. And I think that awakened me, like, look, actually people can change things, And then that's when I started getting involved in NGO work. There was a past 2 years in my grade 10. A guy, Siviwe at Lukwana, kids wanted to start an NGO, Ikamva Labantwana Bethu, wonderful organization, tutoring kids, grew up in Crossroads, wanted to give back to the community, called a few of us, like, Braz, help me out, let's do this thing. Got involved, worked things out, and I've also then got involved in a few other areas with the plan that, look, man, at some point, people will rise up. But yeah, my real turning point was the Arab Spring, man. It was a real game changer for me to see a lot of people in the streets saying one thing and saying, look, things can change, man. In fact, to this day, I still want to go to Tahrir Square.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I actually don't know much about the Arab Spring, but what I do know about the Middle East is that the issues there haven't stabilized in a way that we all would want them to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually would ask you, like, what was the Arab Spring actually? Let's just
quite interestingly, how it started out, a guy who was selling in a market in Tunisia. Life was so tough for him, he decided to commit suicide. But decided to go out, I mean, we would say today with a bang, you know. I don't know if it's insensitive or not. He decided to burn himself
Sure.
at the actual marketplace. It was tough, no money, people are poor, there's no jobs and everything. Decided to burn himself in front of everyone. I think it was in broad daylight, actually. And then Tunisia went up in arms. People started to say, look, the government must fall, everything is bad, new people must come in.
Sure.
And then after that, it was a wave, man. I think it was Morsi at the time, was the president of Egypt. And then from Egypt, it went to Libya. I mean, we're going to talk about Libya. I still think the Libya one was some Western influence there. But generally, I do think there were some genuine concerns from the masses around the economic situation.
Yes.
So it really became just a wave of protest throughout the Middle East, the Arab regions, north of Africa, all the way to the Middle East, Syria, Yemen. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, that now I actually understand, because everyone would talk about the Arab Spring and I didn't really actually know, you know. But okay, thank you for that. But I wanted to go back to your schooling. So you said you went from Oaklands, and then when did you? Because we obviously met in rugby training at
Westerford. Yeah.
Yes. So how did you get into Claremont High School, and just tell me a bit about that?
Yeah. So before that, in Oaklands, there used to be a lot of gang fights, a lot of those. So you go out every time. I mean, we're not part of the gang, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that you come from Claremont, Oaklands, people in Oaklands are in this particular gang. You're always in the bus, you have to go to the bus stop, have to dodge people, whatever. So this one time I'm reading a newspaper, Tatler, I remember. I see, there's this new school that's just opened up. I look at the mission of the school and everything. I was, this is dope. It's actually something dope. And I found out about it in grade 8 already. But I wanted to change in grade 9 to go to Claremont. But in the first cohort, they were only accepting grade 8s and grade 10s. So no grade 9 class. So I had to wait a year. And then in my grade 9 year in Oaklands, I applied to go to Claremont. So from grade 10 onwards, that's when I ended up in Claremont High. Yeah.
And what did you observe as the differences coming from Oaklands into Claremont High?
Oh man, I people won't know this now about Oaklands. Oaklands used to be made of what do you call those things? Bungalows of some sort. It used to be made of bungalows back when I was still there. Now it's nice and proper. But back when I was still there, it was like bungalows. The ceilings were falling and everything. Claremont, beautiful building, very small and intimate. Not more than 18 in a class.
18? Sure.
Yeah. My grade 12 class was 18 and it was the only class in the entire grade.
Sure.
Yeah, it was a very nice experience. And all the classes are smart boards. There's no chalkboards there.
So they really started small, because there were 180 kids in our grade making up, I think, 5 classes at Westerford.
Shit.
So, and that was from grade 8. Now, I remember they talked about like small amounts of classes in Claremont, but they didn't talk about 18.
Yeah.
I guess they wanted to make the process, they wanted to feel the process and then build on that, and probably they've expanded their classes, right?
No, I mean, even then, it wasn't, the official cap is 30. That's the official cap.
Yeah.
But in our class, people didn't get up to 30. I know in other grades we got like 25, but the official cap is 30 officially, so you can't go over 30. I don't know about now, but yeah, back then you couldn't go over 30. So it was a very nice and small, and everyone knew each other. And it was also in a nice, quiet area of Claremont. So it was a very big changer. And another big change was, in Oaklands, everyone, even though we stay in different areas, everyone was taking a bus.
Yeah.
It's either you take a bus or you take a train. But in Claremont, a lot of kids, when you go out, there's cars waiting for them. They get picked up by their parents.
Yes.
You have to go and walk all the way to the Claremont bus station. I think I wrote about that actually in my blog around that. And I also, I had this friend of mine who was staying in Claremont. It was quite weird in classes, he's like, I woke up at 7 this morning. And I'm like, brah, how the fuck do you wake up at 7 to come to school at 8? I have to wake up at 5. Yeah. So those differences started to pick up. But it was a very nice school. The mission of the school was a very big one for me. Providing high quality education at the lowest price possible. And even if you look at them now, they're competing, their matric results compete with the best in the area, but at a fraction of the price that is being offered everywhere else. So that was very nice. But also starting to see the obvious racial divisions of the city, and also how that is then spatially allocated around. Because this one friend of mine was white. Stayed in Bishop's Court, can wake up at whatever time he wants. He's just 5 minutes away down the road from the school. He can come through, man. Even if he wakes up at 7:30, can quickly do a 5-minute shower, probably eat on the road, can still get to school on time.
Yeah.
While you can't do that, you have to wake up. I used to take a 6:45 bus from where I stay, and that one is late.
Yes.
Yeah. The early one is 6:30. You have to take a 6:30 bus.
Where were you residing at that time?
I was still in Lower Crossroads.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know of Lower Crossroads. I know Nyanga. You see, I do a lot of I work with artists.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people, especially young people, didn't really understand the differences at all. And as you said, okay, but that's a lot about our kind of new democracy, where we talk about rainbow freedom, but we don't actually implement rainbow freedom in its truest form.
Yeah. And you find this thing is quite weird. If you go to the Claremont bus station, you must just do a small observation. One would assume that the buses are allocated according to regions, right? For example, Gugulethu is closer to Marienburg, so you would probably assume that the Marienburg bus is next to a Gugulethu bus. But also, you can technically, if you know Cape Town routes, come from Claremont past Hanover Park, go through Marienburg, and then get into Gugulethu.
Yeah.
Funniest shit ever. The aisle closer to the toilets, where the old ShopRite used to be, it's all of the black areas. So you find Khayelitsha and Gugulethu.
The names Harare, Makaza,
they're all there.
Yeah.
And then the second row is all of the colored areas, regardless of how far apart they are from each other. Mitchell's Plain, Marienburg, Hanover Park, Lost City, all of those Mitchell's Plain areas are there. The only integrated lane is the last lane where my bus was, Philippi East and Delft. And I understand you couldn't separate that because in Delft you have both colored and black.
Yes.
It was such a weird thing for me. But guys, man, it doesn't make sense. Gugulethu is nowhere close to Khayelitsha. Why is the Guguletu bus closer to there? So even this Rainbow Nation, at the one place I do think that, okay, cool, would meet. Public transport. But still, even in public transport, we are being separated.
I wonder why they would carry on with that system, because that's obviously glaring.
I don't know why. I mean, I have never had anyone apart from me complain about it.
Yeah, this is the first time I've ever heard that issue.
It's something I always used to say. I'm like, but this is so weird, man. So weird. But yeah, I mean, also sometimes, especially with the Model C schools, the Rainbow Nation is just there at school, right?
And then when you walk out,
You walk out.
Transport.
The white kid gets into the daddy's car.
Yeah.
You have to walk to the train station or whatever. I mean, and I also get it, man. Like, teenagers are kids. Like, you assume that they probably also like you. So in class, you're fine. You're all cool, fine. But once you leave, it's whoever can get there first.
I always thought, during the FISMAS 4, I was like, even though I had, I had some skepticism, I always thought to myself, why aren't the basic education, high school, primary school, that is actually where we're doing a lot of the injustice of education. And we know, like, even with, the best kind of schools always have huge amounts of extramurals, because where do children go if they're not doing these after school activities? They're left more of the time on the streets, and if you know the streets of like areas which are affected by the spatial apartheid, the transport issues and everything, the resources are not there.
Yeah. And I mean, think about it, schools close at what, 2:30, 3 o'clock? People leave work around 4, 5.
Sometimes 7, bro.
So you can ask yourself,
Yes.
between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock, who's looking after that kid?
Yeah.
That kid is alone in the streets. They can do whatever. And another thing, like another funny transport issue, if you look at the N2, the inbound lane going into town has a dedicated bus and taxi lane between 6 and 9 a.m. So buses and taxis can go quickly to town. People arrive at work on time. But the outbound lane doesn't have that. So when you go home, we don't care how what time you arrive. All we care about is making sure you arrive on time at work. But what time you arrive at home doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And the kids are out there. There's a friend of mine who always says, man, I was brought up by the streets.
That sounds like an American. But the streets.
Yeah, it's true, man.
Yeah, no, like it's really an injustice because we know the people that are struggling have a struggle to be with their kids. Obviously, because we operate in a system that doesn't allow, like I would say, like, I feel like the right wing talks about personal responsibility, but how can you have responsibility when the means for you to survive doesn't allow you to be with your children?
Yeah. And I mean that you not being with your children is you trying to take some personal responsibility, but you're trying to put food on the table.
Yeah.
It's either you choose to be with your child and be poor and go hungry, or leave your child and then go and try and find some food.
Yeah.
It's a catch-22, man.
And it's even worse because I feel like the single mother, if you put in the single mother thing, it's just it's just downhill,
Yeah.
But I've always wondered, like, how do we actually fix the education system in South Africa? And I'm talking basic education now. What do you think? And I also want to pick your brain on how do you think, because there's a thought that type of, like, English itself means, that you're intelligent, whereas people can think in their own language and just be as intelligent. It's kind of like outrageous that we've in our society that kind of like success is measured about how close you are to whiteness. Or
I mean, if you hear the story of how the nuclear weapon was designed, the letter that Einstein wrote to, I think was it Roosevelt at the time, I can't remember, but the American president at the time, it took about 3 trips. So he wrote it in German, and then he had to send it to this guy, forget his name, who had to read it and then translate it into English and then send it to another guy to confirm that that's the proper translation to English, only for it to arrive to the American president. And that's how he developed the nuclear weapon. He didn't speak English. He was speaking German. So this whole idea around English being an epitome of smartness is a very unfounded one. But I also do think one of the key issues is, one of the problems we've found in post-colonial Africa is we have been too lazy to be creative. So this idea that we want one language that can unify us all has also created problems. So if you look at people who write around how a kid develops, if you look in South Africa, some of the highest matric pass rates come from specifically Afrikaner schools. Not just white schools, but specifically Afrikaner schools. And the reason is simple. Afrikaner schools post-94, not many people actually went to them because they speak Afrikaans. So many people went to English schools and all of that. And Afrikaners continue to go to Afrikaner schools. And the language that is spoken in school becomes spoken at home as well. The examples used at schools are examples that you can relate to as well. You can't, a young child learns by repetition. So if you teach them something in class and then you make an example around something that they know, they are able, when they're playing in the field, to say, oh, there's what the teacher talked about earlier on. When they go home, they're able to say, oh, there's what. These days, you go to a township school, they make an example with a horse. Where will the child see a horse? Yeah. All they know a horse from seeing it on the pictures. Yes, that's it. Yes. So I do think that one of the of course, the infrastructural issue is important, but also I do think that we need to start thinking around a plural way of educating our kids. The foundation phase are very much important for a child to learn in the mother tongue, so that relation from class to outside of the classroom becomes much more easier. Yeah. They're able to, if the teacher taught about a glass, they will say in class it's a glass. At home, probably it's called something else. Yeah. That translation for a young kid is not that easy. So you want to have a situation where the classroom meets the home, meets the outside, wherever they're playing, so that the cognition becomes much more easier. They're able to relate to what they've learned in class. They're also able to take some of the things that they've seen outside into the classroom and how it helps in their development. And of course, then the issue of infrastructure is very much important. And we can't keep...
But I also feel like for a lot of parents from townships, they see that the only way for their child to have success is for their children to kind of aspire to a suburban inner care CBD, Cape Town, southern suburbs school, and to try and to get their children to school. So how it's kind of also hard. Is there that infrastructure for learning materials, books, literature, that rich history, is it as what's the right word? Is it as comprehensive in other African languages? Because I also think that you need, for you to start the system where everyone is going to learn. I mean, people do, but I think to make it so that someone who starts in English, starts in Afrikaans, starts in any language, is also isiZulu, Tswana. If they start from grade 1 to grade 12, they need to be on exactly the same footing by grade 12 and compete, And probably I think what we'll find is that once you start teaching people in their own languages, they'll probably grasp the concepts, as you said, a lot more quickly because they can liken it to their own reality.
I mean, for example, look, when I was still working in the NGO that I mentioned earlier on, so I was tutoring. There was this one test that we tried to do with the kids. Back in the days, they used to have these standardized tests for grade 3 and then grade 5 and then grade 3, grade 6, and then grade 9, I think.
Yes.
So I was taking these grade 3s over the same thing. Didn't understand a word. Almost all of them got less than 50%. But for some reason, something told me, look, let me try and translate this into Xhosa. Almost everyone passed. I didn't explain the thing again. All I did was to simply translate the test paper into Xhosa. That's it. Didn't try and say, no, let's revise around this thing. But if you looked at the marks, it's a completely different scenario. And I think, if you look at the literature, African literature is quite rich in African languages. The only where you might say that there isn't that much, in post-94, everyone went into writing in English. Everyone. But if you look pre-94, a lot of people wrote in different languages, Xhosa, Zulu. I mean, if you look at the early African intellectuals, S.E.K. Mqhayi, what are the other guys? About Jordan. They wrote in their languages. S.E.K. Mqhayi wrote in Sotho. About Jordan writing in Xhosa. Their articles on izimvo zabantu were written in Xhosa. People were able to intellectualize in their own languages. The one thing that I do think, if we are going to do this endeavor, which we must do, is develop the technical subjects more. And I don't think there's many people always ask the question, for example, if you translate physical science into Xhosa, what are you going to call an atom? Borrow the word, call it an atom. Like there's nothing wrong with it. Like the atom, sure, you can borrow the word. But the explanation and everything doesn't need to be
in English.
In English. You can call it an atom, but everything around it, the rotation, you can say kiachigelezo instead of saying rotation and all of that. So I do think that more investment in terms of literature around languages, that's fine. But the technical subjects need more development. I haven't seen a high school maths textbook that's written in African languages, or a physical science textbook, or a business studies or accounting textbook.
Why do you think that the ruling party hasn't really implemented those type of?
I think those people are lazy, man. I generally think ANC people are intellectually lazy. I mean, sorry. People say that there's corruption. Yeah, there's corruption, sure.
Yeah.
But I also think that they lack ideas, man. They just intellectually lazy. There's no thinking happening in the ANC anymore.
Sure. Yeah, I know. It's kind of like But I would also link it to corruption, because I think that the issue is like, if you're so focused on capturing your party and resources of the government, how can you think clearly about the path to complete liberation of the continent, and specifically South Africa?
Yeah.
But yeah, man, kind of the failings of the basic education system are kind of magnified in the tertiary education system, because it's been kind of a place that has allowed for a lot of people not to achieve their success, so. But obviously, you're a big part of what caused a lot more success for a lot of people. Meaning, I'm alluding to the Fees Must Fall movement, and I know from Claremont High, you were institutionalized in the ivory towers. I loved during that time. I loved the language that everyone used, because there was a lot of like trendy topics that were made during this time. Some of them I personally think that like the decolonized science. I agree with it most, but I don't agree with that specific lady. Remember, I think are you friends
Science
with
must
that?
fall.
You
She's
friends
my
with that
friend,
lady? Yeah. I remember. I saw you.
I still agree.
Really?
Science must fall.
Okay, explain that.
Science must fall. Yeah.
Explain the thinking of science must fall.
You see, that's the problem. People didn't ask the question why.
Yes.
So the main argument that Miki raises is that every scientific endeavor and generally every intellectual endeavor arises from a specific problem in a specific space and time, right? Of course, we can talk about how it can be universalized, but it's coming from a specific space and a specific time. So what we today agree as scientific principles are scientific principles that came up out of specific problem at a specific time in Europe, in the North.
Yeah.
Whether you agree, for example, with the fact that people can use witchcraft to send lightning or not, whether you agree with that or not, right? A lot of people, their cosmology is around that, right? As people who are interested in finding the truth, what stops us from going and investigating that?
Yes.
Before you say, no, she's talking nonsense, we, as philosophers and scientists, ours is to find the truth.
Yeah.
And we find it wherever we go, and we test, and we find out, okay, cool, this was bullshit, this is not bullshit. At some point, people thought the world was flat.
Yes.
At some point, until Copernicus, people thought that the earth was the center of the world.
Yeah.
And then we investigated it, and we found out, well, no, this is not the truth. So if people in Africa, and a huge number of people in Africa, believe this thing, that people can actually send lightning. I grew up, my grandfather was well known in the village for apparently praying for rain. So he would go up to the mountain, stand there for hours. I remember this one time I even fell asleep. Pray. But apparently, I was still very young to actually notice the difference. But apparently, after it comes down, a few hours later, rain starts.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not saying this is a truth, right? But why are we not investigating it before we say it's nonsense?
Yeah.
So in that sense, that's why I still agree with Miki. Science must fall. If science is, because clearly the kind of science that we're in now is religion. It's not science, it's religion. All we say is like, okay, cool. If so-and-so says this is the truth, and it has been said by millions, Newton found it out, Einstein said it, therefore we can't disagree. It's the truth. And anything outside of this thing is bullshit. That's not science, that's religion. And in that sense, science must fall.
But for me, I kind of think that it's not so much the how do I say, the scientific method that people were angry about. I felt like what they thought is that the political aspect, because I feel like it is political, and you can politicize science, obviously, but I feel like the pushback was because the idea that scientific method is not true and that it's inherently Western is kind of a bit far-fetched, because a lot of maths, science, everything has come from most of the world. It wasn't just Western thinkers that have contributed to science. Like gunpowder came from China, I think. And there's been a load of people who have actually contributed to science from different backgrounds. And I kind of thought that it's very true that in general, when we talk about the African context, there hasn't been enough investigation, enough knowledge that has been mainstreamed. You know, there's a lot of, you know, it's not Oyecha, it's Oyecha. Yeah, that traditional healers, you know, have you know, there's a lot of truth and scientific facts in that, you know, in the stuff that they're doing. But I feel like it's just that issue is kind of like the lightning was how do I say, it's not anecdotal, but like scientifically for scientists listening to it, they weren't like, okay, she has something valid to say. If she had said that, if we look at the context of Africa in general, and we understand that the way that science is communicated and being given to us has been in a colonial Western way, then I would agree. And the funding of science in general has not been enough in Africa to solve Africa's problems. You know, like, you know, when I've heard Dr. Lushaba talk about this, if UCT was really wanted to solve African issues or Cape Townian issues of townships, of kind of like black suffering, why haven't they do it? Why do they keep on creating people that are meant for the private sector, capital? Yeah. So I would agree in that sense. But the problem is that I feel like the examples that were being used were kind of...
Like which one?
Like this lightning. Even though I understand what you're saying.
But did you go and investigate?
Yeah, but okay.
You see. No, but this is a problem. Okay. This is why I say we must not be religious. Whether, look, I can get it. Look, we can be a bit like shocked about, okay, cool. Wait, what this person say? But it's not just her. Millions and millions of people in Africa believe this is true.
Yeah.
Are we saying that all of those people are stupid? Are they all superstitious? Like, what makes them believe in that thing? Like, have someone seen, for example, someone says, look, I'm going to throw so-and-so with lightning, and then it happens. We don't know. Let's go and investigate. But I'm very skeptical of this easy dismissal, because the reason why this dismissal is it's a subconscious issue. Subconscious issue. Of course, science has been what you call coming from different areas.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that Europe has centralized science into Europe. If you look between Ptolemy and Copernicus, in the Middle East, there were sketches that were found way before Copernicus that actually say what Copernicus said later on, that the Earth is not the center of the world. Yeah. But for some reason, the people in the Middle East didn't publish those sketches. Could have been political reasons, religious reasons at the time. It was quite Islam-based, whatever. We don't know. Copernicus later on releases that. Today we call it the Copernican revolution, but it was discovered much more earlier that actually this is not the truth. So Europe has centralized science under itself. And then what Europeans, specifically white people, do when there's an attack on science, they are quick to say, but no. This is not just us, it's everyone else. By so doing, leaving Europe at the center of science again. They don't want to go out. A lot of people analyze that video from one clip, the part that says science must fall. It was a whole seminar. How many people that actually disagree listen to the seminar? How many?
I'll be honest, I didn't.
You see,
Yes.
a lot of people didn't. They only read, only watched the part that says science must fall. They don't know in what context it was spoken in. They don't care about that. But there's this inherent thing that you want to defend. That's why I say it's becoming more of a religion than a scientific method. We must, before we say we disagree, let's go and find out. Because many people disagree. For example, there's this guy in India, a mathematician, who calls bullshit to the number system. His main argument is that the whole idea of infinity was added into the number system by religious Christians in Europe, because for science had to relate to also the Christian belief that there's eternity. So also the number system must still believe in the eternity. He's like, no, there's no such thing as infinity. It doesn't make sense. But we use a lot of those things. It also disagrees with irrational numbers and all of those things. So there are people who disagree with scientific method, but they have their arguments. We can go and engage them, disagree with them, agree with them in certain points. But this idea that we quickly dismiss them, for me, is very suspicious. I don't think it's healthy for any healthy discussion at all. I don't say agree with them, but at least let's investigate and then disagree on facts. But this idea that we're just going to disagree because we feel like our gut feeling says no, and our gut feeling, of course, is socially and politically informed by many of our upbringing and different contexts.
I think this is a good segue, because I think that conversation could be another hour, to be honest. So I think this is actually good segue to the Lindiwe Sisulu versus the judiciary conversation, because, you know, it's been a very polarizing conversation, and I've seen that some people kind of see the attack on the judiciary as something that should be dismissed. The merits of the argument should be taken away, and we should not get into the realms of criticizing the establishment document of South Africa. So what's your take on the whole situation, and do you have like problems? And maybe you can speak to the PACs. Does the PAC have issues with the Constitution more than just Section 25?
I mean, we disagree with the whole thing. It's the same reason why we left the ANC. The whole preamble is unethical. You can't say South Africa belongs to all who live in it when South Africa was stolen. It was stolen by white people, not by just people that we don't know, people in the sky, like some angels. It was stolen by white people.
Yes.
So you can't, even before they bring back that which was stolen, already say South Africa belongs to all. It's not to say when we take back South Africa, now we're going to kick out people and say, go wherever. But allow us the chance. Like, there's this anti-black idea from whites that for some reason, black people are inherently bad, just like them. Like, because they killed us and they did all it did to us, it's as if also if we take back what we want, we're going to do the same thing. So they're thinking on our behalf and therefore acting on that thinking on our behalf.
Yeah.
South Africa doesn't belong to anyone. South Africa belongs to Africans. It belongs to Africans. That, whether we are going to allow people in South Africa or not, that's ours to decide on. But also, I'm not saying that now simply because South Africa belongs to us, we start going to kick people out and all of that. I mean,
But who is an African? Just to clarify.
an African, so we could clarify this properly. An African is someone who can claim no genealogy anywhere else but in Africa, who is born and is made in Africa, their ancestry is in Africa.
Yeah.
And they can lay no claim anywhere else but Africa.
So,
That's an African.
but how does biracial people and people of mixed race, how do they fit in being African then?
Where are they from, Gandhi?
Where they born?
Where are they from?
They're born in Africa.
Where are their ancestry from? Is it not African?
But everyone comes from Africa.
Chief, we're not talking about that. But, for example,
The one parent is off the boat and the other parent is like born in Africa.
They're African. Is their ancestry not African? For example, the PAC, we argue that, for example, if you look in South Africa, the ANC has the four nations theory: the whites, the African, the colored, and the Indian. We have a three nations theory: the whites, the Africans, and the Indians. You can't claim that coloreds are not African. Like, if for example, let's say we were to do the Idi Amin kind of a thing, kick out all white people back to Europe, kick out all Indians back to India, where are you going to kick coloreds to? It doesn't make coloreds are African. Like, they have an answer. But of course, apartheid, colonialism has tried to create this idea that coloreds are not African in some weird way, that even colored people start believing in this thing. You even see it in the new First Nation movement. Someone is very quick, even if they believe in the First Nation, they are very proud to call themselves Khoi, they're very proud to call themselves San, but to call themselves African, it seems like it's a huge jump.
Yes.
And you ask yourself, so bro, where were the Khois, kind? Were they in an island somewhere? Like, if you're going to call yourself Khoi, you're African, right? Yeah. But so, fundamentally, therefore, for us, the Constitution is unethical on that basis. You can't say South Africa belongs to all. It belongs to Africans. It's Africans who can decide then what they do with that which belongs to them. Of course, then you also have Section 25, that's also problematic. But for us, at the principle and fundamental level, the preamble itself is completely off. It's the same reason why we broke away in 1955. And a beautiful book to read on the unethicalness of the Constitution. You must read, here is a table by Ndumiso Dladla. It's a beautiful exploration on why the Constitution is unethical. And going to Sisulu, first of all, I think the article was badly written. It was a very badly written article. But there's nothing that Sisulu says that's new. I mean, most of if you look now, if we are going to leave out the flowery language, the badly writtenness, the content of it and what's the actual content of the article, it's nothing new. People have been saying this thing. The Constitution is anti-black. It's some say it's anti-poor and all of that. It's something that has been, it's a discussion in academia.
Yeah.
If you look at, for example, now within jurisprudence, you have what they call progressive constitutionalist, transformative constitutionalist, constitutional abolitionist. It's a debate. It's a debate. So for some reason, the media, it's as if media people have the same WhatsApp group. They quickly meet and then they caucus that this is the narrative we're running with.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced how we got to terming it as an attack. It's a critique, not an attack. It's a critique.
But I think a lot of people had the issue with the language they use towards black jurists and judges.
There's a condition. If you read that part again, and also for another thing, we're being selective because she was quoting someone else there.
Yeah.
She says, leaders and interpreters of the law who are colonized. There's an operational word there, who are colonized. So are we, by saying that it's an attack on the judiciary, are we now, by ourselves, saying that the judiciary is colonized? It's not her who said that. She said leaders and interpreters of the law who are colonized. So if you're going to say it's an attack on the judiciary, you first have to say that the judiciary is colonized. And by you saying that the judiciary is colonized, you then agree with what she's saying. Because indeed, colonized leaders and judiciaries are like that. I like that. And also, why are we singling out the judiciary when she said leaders as well? Why is the presidency not saying that they feel attacked? Because she said leaders and interpreters of the law, but we only focus on the judiciary only.
Yeah.
And then you find the acting Chief Justice doing the unthinkable, entering into the political fray and calling it out an attack. I mean, I think calling it an attack is a huge jump. I mean, even if you disagree with the language, let's say you disagree with the language. Okay, sure, maybe the critique was a bit too harsh. You can say that. There's nothing wrong. The critique was too harsh. But to call it an attack, it's as if you're trying to completely close off discussion completely. And think about it. What happens, since now the Chief Justice has gone out and made a press briefing, what happens if, I don't know, the Deputy President, for example, just say, he's entitled to his opinions, right? What happens if he writes another opinion piece and he says, in fact, Minister Sisulu was very soft in her critique and gives a much harder critique? Will now Zondo come out again and respond to that one? What happens if Lindiwe responds to Zondo? Because he hasn't responded to Zondo yet. What happens if she responds to Zondo?
Yeah.
Will Zondo now call another press briefing and respond to Lindiwe? Isn't that now putting the judiciary right at the center of politics? It was a bad move. I mean, whether you disagree with Lindiwe or not, I don't think that what has been happening is a proper, and everyone is critiquing. There's only one article. I also have my disagreements with it, but there's one article that actually engaged the article, I think, at a theoretical level. What's it called? But it's by Dinga's Kwebo, Rodman Dinga. He wrote an article in response, something about Sisulu's. I forgot the title, but he's the only one who's been able to actually engage the content of the article. Everyone else has been on this buzzword that it's an attack, it's an attack, it's an attack. But I argue that it's still a critique. Many people books have been written, man, about this thing. Books have been written about it.
Yeah.
It's nothing new that she's saying. And also she made an operational word there. She said, leaders and interpreters of the law who are colonized. So by Zondo going out and saying it's an attack on him and an insult on him, is he saying he's colonized? Is he agreeing? So let's start there. So you see, there's so many angles in which we can look at this thing And some of us can agree, some of us can disagree, and all of that. But I think calling an attack, man, is too harsh. I think it's way too harsh.
I think that the issue with that whole response and to and fray is that, we could be speaking about better issues, or speaking factually about what, like, if you say the whole thing needs to be thrown out, like, rather say that straight than, because what I think is problematic is her using arguments that, leaders in the PAC, like leaders in the EFF, Pan-African leaders have been saying for a while, and her using it to benefit an alleged campaign, or using the issue to just get PR, which I think, I don't know who wrote it for her, because I am of the personal view that
ghostwritten.
It was ghostwritten.
I also think it's ghostwritten.
But I think she has done something very well, and she has now obviously said that the presidency was very, very bad in issuing a
fake statement,
a fake apology letter from her. So I think we're setting.
Our presidency is involved in fake news.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that our issue a lot of the time is that a lot of the leaders aren't really caring about the people, and they're caring more about personal interests, which is why I don't like. I think a lot of the leaders in the ANC shouldn't actually even exist, like, in this moment of South Africa, because they're like, yeah, man, I would say they were 30 when freedom came, but now they're 69 or something, and they are, as you said, irrelevant, and they speak to issues that we don't need. Okay, man. We push for time now, so I'm trying to think of what is actually important here. Okay, let's talk about Africa, because we can do another conversation, and then we'll talk in depth on other issues.
Yeah.
But let's talk about African immigration. So, there's been a lot of parties that have been selling the idea of that. Not that we need to hate immigrants, they just semi-xenophobic, anti-illegal. They're very anti-illegal immigration.
I mean, it's not xenophobic, because if it was xenophobic, they'll be going for all those white people who don't come from here. It's mostly Afrophobic.
Yes. Afrophobia, definitely.
Yeah.
We need, I think, the right labels.
Yeah.
We need the right labels.
You know, the funniest thing, there was one of those, I think it was in the 2012 xenophobic attacks. It was the funniest clip I ever watched. This guy, another Afrophobic attacks in Soweto, and then this Swiss journalist interviews the guy, and then she says, "Hi, I'm from Switzerland. I'm a journalist. I want to know why you guys killing these people." And then he answers in a very simple answer, no rhetoric whatsoever, like, they're not from here. I was like, okay, is there no one seeing the awkwardness here?
Yes.
There's someone who's talking to you who's not from here. Bruh, why don't you just continue killing this one? Like, he's just here.
Yeah.
But because she was white,
Yes.
Yeah. But man, that thing of all, people are using, I mean, of course, it's politics. People are going to use whatever they use to get votes and everything.
Yeah.
But I also think that the problem needs to be dealt with we need to really look into the problems. So, for example, they're not lying, right? They use arguments that everyone can see. One, they will say, if you go to Joburg, Yeovil, Hillbrow, Nigerians are selling drugs. That's what they will say. Of course, not all Nigerians are selling drugs.
Yes.
But if you go to Hillbrow, chances are, if you're looking for drugs, it's a Nigerian guy that you're going to find.
Yeah.
Chances are, majority, it is.
Yeah.
Are they going to say Zimbabweans are taking all of our waitresses' jobs? Chances are, if you go to any restaurant,
You'll find
a Zimbabwean waiter. But we're not asking the deeper question, right? If you look, for example, I'm on a podcast now, I'm not going to say too many things unless I get in trouble myself. If you look at the drug cartel in Cape Town specifically, it's highly racialized.
Yes.
You get the Europeans from the Czech Republic, Russia, and what's the other ones? Forget now, but you have them as the international guys who you never see on the streets, who you never see anywhere. They stay in the nice houses in Constantia or Camps Bay. And then you get the middle guys who do the distribution are mostly the Khaleds. From your, I don't want to mention his name, Mike.
Yeah, they might get you. I know, I also know you.
You get them to be the distributors of everything. And then shame the poor Nigerian guy who doesn't have anything is given money, bro, you don't have anything. Here is money, sell this thing at the club. But when we cry, we're gonna cry the Nigerian guy. Shame, bro, it has nothing to do, man. Like, he's poor. And also the same thing with, if you look at the jobs, the so-called jobs issue. A capitalist, it's in his interest to make profit. Here is Michael Holmes here. You have a labor rights as a South African. You can join a union. If the person says, I'm going to pay you 10 rand per hour, you can go and complain, right? But if I hire an illegal immigrant and I give him the same 10 rand, where are they going to complain? They can't.
Yeah.
So as someone who wants to maximize profit, who am I going to hire?
Yeah.
So I argue that the anger is misplaced. The anger is misplaced. So, cool, this is a problem. Yeah, we can all say it. It's there, I agree, when you go to, as we said earlier on. But our anger is misplaced. We're not asking ourselves that's why I always say lived experience is important up to a certain point.
Yeah.
Because it can make you characterize the wrong things. Because that's what you see. So you don't ask the deeper questions.
Yeah.
I think these political parties and everyone who's doing this is asking the wrong question. And also, though, one thing that irritates me as well, we have a very liberal way of dealing with this thing. People who talk about anti-xenophobia, they will tell you, but you guys also, when you were under apartheid, you came to us, blah, 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 blah. We helped you out. Sure, I agree. We must forever be grateful to frontline states for helping us. But it was a hugely different scenario. At most, South Africans in frontline states were 500,000. At most. Most of them were staying in camps.
Yes.
They were in camps where no one knows them, no one sees them. They're just there in the forest, in a camp, they're training, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. At some point, they're going to go back home.
Yeah.
You have a few leaders, Gemhlambi, who stay in the suburbs, blah, blah, blah. They're not selling anything, but they're there. They were not competing in the economy of the country. They were not competing with the jobs there. Maybe a few, of course, exiles were doing that. What we have currently, because of global capitalism and the general depression of the continent itself, more and more people are going to cities and towns that look like they're still prospering. And then now we are competing, all of us, with the small resources that we have.
Yeah.
So, of course, the sentiment is going to rise up because people are competing over the small resources that are there. And that we need to deal with. But this idea that we're going to tell people that, no, but you are also helped by Tanzania, you're also helped by Angola, it's not going to work.
Yes.
It's really not going to work. We need to find ways of saying, okay, cool, we see this is a problem, but you are looking at the wrong issue. Yeah, sure, there's a Zimbabwean lady waitering, but if you ask that lady how much she's getting paid,
yes,
like what are our unions doing?
Yes.
Why can't our unions say that whether you are a foreigner or South African, you should be able to join a union. Because that way, because no one, bro, wants to work as a slave. No one wants to do that.
True.
It's just that if you have no other option, you're going to do it. But now you find people who are going to exploit it for their own benefits. For example, if you look, that guy was supposed to do a national shutdown today. What's his name? Lux, whatever. It's the same guy, man. You know, during the unrest, who used to carry that.
Oh, the Soweto guy.
The Soweto guy.
Yeah.
You know
Lux.
Lux, whatever. You know that charlatan. You know, it was found out that he actually owns a shop at Maponya Mall. So that's why he was defending Maponya Mall, because he owns a shop.
Yeah.
But now, if you look at his way of dealing with things, he generally he says that foreigners are taking our jobs, right? But if you look at every time he attacks, he always goes for the Somali and Pakistani shops and says they're selling old things, whatever. He owns a shop, right, in Soweto. If all the Pakistanis and all the Somalis go, who stands to benefit?
Him.
But now we are all going to follow him and say he's correct in everything. We're not going to I don't have a shop.
Yeah.
He's trying to fight his competition by using us.
Yeah. Sure. When I saw how xenophobic he was a bit, I was like, yay. Well, Afrophobic. Let's identify it.
He loves white people.
I saw those photos.
He only hates people that look like him. That's his only problem.
Yo, it's so sad, man.
Shame. I mean, it's not us that said he must be born black, man.
But man, the issue now is we have no more time, bro. And now we're going to have to wrap up our conversation. But I feel like we definitely need a part 2, because I have literally I've only done 30% of my questions. So we definitely need a part 2. But thank you so much for actually coming on the show. And I hope to have a long-term thing with you, and hopefully we can bring you in every time there's some hot issues, especially with the current situation in our country, because we need leadership, man.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Yeah. I mean, I never thought a DA person would.
I was going to try to be apolitical on that. You never thought a DA people would interview you, bro.
No, let's each other part 2, man. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.